Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of the Coffee with Cosmos DB series. Before I introduce our guest today, let me do some housekeeping announcement. If you are joining this live session for the first time, Coffee with Cosmos DB series is intended to spread the knowledge on Cosmos DB by experts to the community. If you are a beginner who is already using, if you are a beginner or uh, developer who is already using Cosmos DB, make sure to subscribe this channel and join this exciting world of Azure Cosmos DB series. The format of this session is very simple, and it's going to be with a lot of questions, and we will keep it short for 15 to 20 minutes. If you are interested to present or have any feedback, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter handle. If you have missed the first episode of the Coffee with Cosmos DB series, please go ahead and watch the recorded video on the topic on Azure Cosmos DB for relational developers. With that, let me introduce our second Coffee with Cosmos DB series guest. Let me add him to the stage. Yeah, so today he's going to talk about one of the hot topics these days. Hi, Abhinav. Why don't you
Hey,
introduce
hi
yourself?
Saji. Yeah, hi Saji. Thanks for hosting me here. Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of Coffee with Cosmos DB. I'm Abhinav. I'm a part of Cosmos DB team. I basically come from a mobile app development background. Have been a, a power user of databases and have developed mobile applications. So, have been working with Cosmos DB team for more than 1.5 years now, almost. Yeah.
Thanks, Abhinav. Yeah, on the fun note, also you share a lot of interesting stuff on different topics on LinkedIn. Make sure to follow him on LinkedIn as well. All right, today's topic seems to be very interesting to me as well, and also for the viewers. And I guess we are going to talk about the important topic, right? The money, the cost, which is indeed a hot thing to analyze. So let's jump into the discussion. So Abhinav, when I started with Cosmos DB before, like 4 years, there has been always one thing that I didn't really understand, and I know it's the case for a lot of developers who want to get started with Cosmos DB. So my first question for you today is that when we look at Cosmos DB pricing, we see the
Mhm.
terms throughput and RUs. So what are those? And also, can you briefly explain why we can't have a fixed price for different operations that we perform on Cosmos DB?
That's a very good beginner question, Saji. So when I started my journey with Cosmos DB, when I was thinking a lot about like what are our use, what is throughput. So I'll explain it with a simple analogy. Uh, let's say we are running some operation on our personal computers. So if we head over to our task manager on Windows, or I don't know what's the similar tool in Mac or other platforms, but if you look at what resources we are consuming, we'll see CPU consumption, we'll see memory consumption, we'll see disk usages. So whenever we perform any operation on a machine, these are three major components that are involved. Similarly, when we perform any operation on a database, be it a read, write, delete, or anything else, uh, there is a lot of things. There are a lot of things going on under the hood, and they require compute, they require memory, they require disk operations, all those things. So we could have offered that, okay, this much you are consuming for compute, this much you are computing consuming for memory, this much you are consuming for disk usages, and then there is a different cost for each component, and then user must have been super confused about that. If they are executing a read or write, and certain amount they are spending on different components, it would have been very difficult for them. So what we did, we introduced the concept of RUs, which abstracts out everything under the hood. So the user does not have to worry about how much compute, how much memory, how much disk they are using. It is all abstracted under RU. So RUs can be treated as a currency which is used for read and write operations. So in Cosmos DB, if you look at it, it is always guaranteed that in a single region, if you are performing a read operation, point read operation by specifying the partition key on a 1 KB document, it is guaranteed that you will be consuming just one RU. So it gives some predictability to the user that, okay, 1 KB document, single region read, it will cost me 1 RU. So I can predict, okay, if I'm executing 1,000 reads, how many RUs will be required. And this 1,000 RUs that I mentioned. So let's say I'm running a workload where my application is going to perform, let's say, 1,000 reads per second. So how many RUs do I need to allocate to cater to that workload where I require to serve 1,000 reads per second? So that becomes the throughput. So 1,000 RUs per second will be required in such a case. So that is the throughput requirement. So throughput is basically how much RUs per second we require to serve our workload. So
All right.
yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for the insights with a great example or analogy that you shared. Now it makes sense to me. Say, as a developer, we are building many applications, right? So assume I'm building a shopping cart application, which is one of the common scenarios that every developer would deal with. How can I assess how much throughput I will require for my workload or my application? What are the factors that I need to consider, or what are the factors on which the throughput calculation would depend on?
All right. Yeah. So again, there are a lot of factors which determine how much throughput will be required. The primary factors are how many read write operations you are going to perform per second. But apart from that, there are other settings as well. So we do have a very good tool out there which we can utilize to assess our throughput requirements. Let me quickly share my screen and head over to capacity calculator. Saji, let me
Yeah.
know
Okay.
when my screen is visible to you.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let me add it to the stage as well. Yeah, we can see it.
yeah. So maybe you can share the link with our audiences here. Uh, you can find this tool at cosmos.azure.com/capacity calculator. So capacity calculator is a planning tool which can help you to assess how many RUs will be required for your workload. Here, depending on, as you know, that Cosmos DB is a multimodal databases. Here you can choose what API you are going to use. For my example, I've chosen Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL API. And then the
Okay.
number of regions. It might happen that our customers might require to deploy their workloads in multiple regions because that's how their application is structured. That's how their users are spread across geographies. So number of regions, we can choose one or two. This will determine how much throughput we'll require. Then whether we are doing multi-region writes or not, enabling or disabling multi-region writes will also have an impact on the RU requirement and the cost requirement. Then again, how much data is stored, it does not have any implication on RUs, but it does have an implication on your cost. In Cosmos DB, you
Okay.
are charged 0.25 USDs for 1 GB of data stored. So that is there. And
Okay.
then, yeah, we'll come to these workload modes as well. And another important factor that determines how much cost will be incurred, how many RUs will require, is uh, the item size. So if the item size is small, obviously we'll incur smaller, will require lesser throughput. And if the sizes are large, so it will require more resources. So that is there. It does not vary linearly, but yeah, with size it varies.
Got
Then
it. Okay.
depending
Yep.
on, yeah, then depending on how many read, writes, updates, deletes, and queries that you are performing, this will change.
Yeah, for me, everything looks good in a theoretical manner, right? You talked about different concepts and uh, different configurations that Cosmos DB provides. But on behalf of viewers, can we take up a practical case, like how we can estimate our throughput requirement uh, for sample application?
So let me think of the simplest use case. Let's say I have an application where users are uh, signing in, and we are writing some information related to them, and then they are fetching some information. Let's say we are just showing their profile information. So always there will be lesser number of users who will be signing up than the number of users who will be consuming information from our portal. So let's say when they are signing in, we are writing, and when we are displaying their profile information, they are actually reading this information. So the simplest use case that I will think of is that our workload is steady. By steady, I means that uh, there is very little deflection in the trends. Like, let's say if 10 users come to my application this minute, next minute again I'll have 10 or 9 users, and the trend will be a flat line. There will be no spikes in the traffic. So in case of steady traffic, I think this example that I have my on my screen is good enough. So we basically first choose which API we have, how many number of regions we want to deploy. Right now, for a simple application, I have used one region, and then I head over to choose the workload mode as steady because there is no spike or changes in the traffic trends. And then let's say my the records that I'm writing. So whatever information related to the user that we are reading or writing is around 1 KB of document size. So that size I have specified, and let's say in a second, not more than 1,000 users are reading their profile information. So I will write 1,000 point reads because I'll use a partition key. Let's say we'll make their email IDs or phone numbers or some other such category field as a partition key and specify that, and using that we'll perform point reads to fetch their profile details. So let's say we are fetching 1,000 such profiles in a second, so that will translate into 1,000 reads. And let's say we have 100 writes in a second, so 100 users are onboarding per second. So I specified 100, and when we calculate, this is the detailed information that we get. So for queries, we'll require zero RUs because we have zero queries. And for point reads, as I mentioned earlier, also for a 1 KB document in a single region with a partition key specified, point read is one RU. So for 1,000 RUs, we require 1,000. For 1,000 point reads, we require 1,000 RUs. And for create, similarly, we required 500 RUs here for 100 creates. This again, I want to point out, this number does not increase linearly with size or numbers. So you will not always be charged for 5 RUs per create. So this gives you an a rough estimate about how much throughput you need to allocate. So here you see that you require 1,500 RUs per second of throughput for this workload. So
Yeah.
go ahead and provision that throughput, and you should be good to
Yeah,
cater
thanks a
to
lot
your
for
workload.
sharing this. I think this is one of the common mistakes that I did. Like, I always started to develop the application and then realized, okay, Cosmos DB is charging me so much. I think that's a common mistake that most of the developers would tend to do. So this is a good exercise that I would recommend personally to all the developers who want to work with Cosmos DB for their workloads, whatever it is. Like, thanks for sharing that. So I have another question, right? Say with the modern way of applications, say we are building a lot of cloud native and largely scalable applications, but many times I don't see a steady requirement like for these workloads. Say application do not have a steady workload. How do we access the throughput requirement in that case?
Yeah. So uh, as I pointed out, uh, let's take an example again. So uh, uh, at some point, let's say for the first hour, I have steady workload, and then the next hour I have sudden spike in the traffic, sudden spike in the number of users accessing my application, and then again it goes dead. Nobody comes to my application, or very few users visit the application. So in that case, it becomes very confusing for the user. How do we estimate our cost? Do we take the average of the maximum requirement or the minimum requirement, or do we provision throughput based on the maximum requirement itself? So a lot of users actually do this mistake. They think that, okay, while estimating, we'll take the maximum required number of operations. So let's say if at peak my application will have 1,000 point reads, but During all other times, it will be just 100 point reads. So a lot of users will do this mistake. They'll estimate their throughput. They'll think that, okay, let's over provision, keeping 1,000 the maximum requirement in mind, and then they will see huge estimates. And if they do not estimate upfront and they actually provision those many RUs, that much throughput, then they'll get huge bills. So that is a mistake that users do. And for that, we do have another setting. So if we go here, uh, we do have a variable setting. So the moment we click on this variable workload, we will have different set of options. So right now we were looking at steady. Now if I click on variable, so did you notice that we have two other settings? What percentage of
Got it.
time at peak, right? This, and the other change that happened was we now ask you how many operations do you perform at peak and how many operations do you perform off peak. So this gives us an idea. Okay, let's say this 10% of the time, let's say 1 hour during 24 hours a day, your uh, workload is at peak. So that is roughly how much of the time? That is roughly 4 or 5% of the time that your traffic is at the peak. Rest of the time, it's off peak. So here you can simply specify, okay, if at peak I have 5,000 point reads, but off peak, let's say I have just 50. And similar for creates, let's say I have 1,000 creates at peak and let's say 100 creates later on. So once you calculate, hit calculate, we'll get the estimates there as well. So this this feature helps you to identify, okay, if the traffic, if the workload is not steady, how do I calculate?
All right, got it. I think you explained it so well with the great example. So let me come to another point, right? Apart from all the
Mhm.
points that you explained, are there any other settings that may impact the throughput requirement that developers need to be aware of?
um yeah, like apart from other settings, there are two prominent settings that people should think about. Cosmos DB actually, those settings do not appear here. This is a simplified calculator mode. If you sign in, you'll get those two settings as well. So
Got it. Okay.
Cosmos DB provides 5 consistency modes for your data. So depending on what consistency mode do you choose, so if you go for a stronger consistency level above default consistency, so you will be required to allocate slightly more, because then we have to acknowledge reads and writes and adhere to the consistency promises. So that is there. The other setting will be the indexing. So indexing helps in easier, faster queries, all that. So if the by default, if you enable default settings, so indexing, it will be automatically indexing everything Cosmos DB. You can specify what fields you actually want to index. So depending on how much you are indexing, there might be slight variations in the RU requirements.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I think those are the fundamental questions that I had. I see a lot of questions on the chat from the viewers as
Oh,
well.
that's good.
So let's start
I
with the
think I
first
can
one.
stop sharing.
Yeah, go ahead. Let me remove that. So the first question, do we always need to know our throughput requirement upfront in Cosmos DB? What if we are starting a new app and we can't estimate the traffic in the beginning? I think this is a fantastic question. Like this is a common scenario even I faced in the past as well. Yeah,
Uh, yeah. So a lot of the times when I was developing POCs for my own applications, uh, I could not anticipate how many users will come to my application and how much should I provision. So there is this serverless offering from Cosmos DB. That's a very good starting point, in my opinion. So there you don't have to worry about uh, like provisioning upfront. You pay for whatever you use. There obviously there are differences on uh, normal this throughput and serverless works, but serverless is a very good offering where we can start in such cases where you do not need to estimate your workload upfront.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. And we recommend serverless for like production workloads. Oh,
Yeah, definitely. So
okay.
serverless, you can go all in. There's nothing
All right.
wrong with using serverless. Yeah.
All right. I think we can move to the next one from Anupam. What if my requirement is varying in, or is it, I mean, or is seasonal? How can I have elastic RU allocation?
Uh, by seasonal, do you mean that okay, your traffic varies during a day, or like it varies during months or like that?
I think you can make an assumption because there is no way to, yeah, get the feedback
Okay.
right now.
So
But yeah,
uh,
you can. I think
so yeah.
the user is
So I
referring.
take both the
It's varying. Yeah.
both the scenarios. I'll take. Uh, in Cosmos DB, you can actually change throughput, uh, provision more or less resources. So that can take care of your varying throughput requirements. But also, there is an auto scale offering. So if you choose auto scale, you can actually you can provision certain amount of resources. Let's say at peak you are required to provision 10,000 RUs per second, and off peak you require just 1,000 RUs. So you can uh, put a number as 10,000 in auto scale, and then whenever it is not used, you'll not be charged for the peak. So you'll be charged for what you use between the max and min, and it auto scales itself. So you don't have to worry about tweaking your throughput settings every time.
Got it. Okay. I hope that answers the question. We have a couple of more questions from Anupam. Before that, let me take a question from Rico. How will I be billed if I'm not consuming all the throughput that has been provisioned?
Okay, so you are being billed for the throughput that you are actually provisioning. So it is like whatever you provision, you will be billed for that.
Got it. Okay. So we can take the next one.
So so
Okay, he's
so let
building an
me add, like,
application. Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
uh, when billing happens, so our unit is 100 RUs per second per hour. So depending on how many RUs you have consumed during that hour, so it will be based on that.
Okay, makes sense. So here is another question. Say if he's building an application that has 1 million users and he creates a partition by user email ID. Uh, so will I expect it to have 1 million partitions, or is there any performance implications of the number of partitions? I think this is a good question in the for the previous session, but yeah, I know you have been working on the same concept. I mean, on the similar
So
questions, probably you can take this up.
there are 1 million email IDs, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Uh, yeah, yeah. So there is a limit on the number of logical partitions. So if you are specifying it as a primary key, as a partition key, so each uh, like partition key, each unique value in partition key will lead to a logical partition. There is a limit on how many logical partitions we can have, and in terms of storage, and again there is a limit on how much storage there can be in a physical partition. So above that, and depending on the number of RUs that you have, will it will be determined how many physical and logical partitions do you have.
Got it. I think we can move to the final question because we are almost on time. This is our final one. So if my traffic is peak on weekdays and off peak on weekends, what is the percentage? Uh, is 5 by 7
Yeah,
into 100. So yeah,
yeah, again, as I specified, so be it a weekly calculation or a daily calculation. So out of 7 days, if you are calculating in terms of weeks, so 2 days out of seven you do not have your traffic, you have your traffic on peak. So 2 divided by 7 into 100, that will be like 20%, right? 2 divided by 7 uh, into 100, that will be around 30% of your time that you have your traffic at peak.
Got it. Yep. I think that's all on the question side. Yeah, I think we are almost on time. We are running over 5 minutes. So thanks a lot for all the questions, and thanks Abhinav for answering patiently.
Yeah.
With this, yeah, we have come to the end of the episode. Before I close, make sure to subscribe the channel and please do provide feedback. And if you want to hear about a particular topic, or even if you want to present in this forum, please reach out to me. And we will meet again in a couple of weeks with another special guest with another interesting topic. And thanks again for the Abhinav. Thanks again for the session, Abhinav. And thanks everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks so much, Saji, for having me. Thanks, everyone.